You know, I read a lot of people saying that this is a Bitcoin revolution, what's happening here, but it's more than just Bitcoin. It's the protocols inspired by Bitcoin. It's Ethereum. You know, these tenets of decentralization, transparency, peer-to-peer interaction. What sort of phrase can we attribute to what's happening? How do we define this?
I think it's bigger than just those protocols. I think it's all about decentralization.
So that's the main revolution here. That's the.
A long time ago, when we lived in smaller units, villages, tribes, it was easy to govern. It was easy to make decisions. The structure of the economy was based on consensus, basically. The ability to communicate virtually instantly, know who you're dealing with, and form decisions in a community very, very rapidly. So as we grew geographically more dispersed and our societies became more complex, then the proper, most efficient organizing principle was hierarchical top-down control systems. And those things are great for building big, complicated machines in situations where communication is difficult or slow or expensive. But they lead to certain kinds of economies and certain kinds of business structures and social structures, government, military, pyramids, basically. And those things have been wonderful and necessary for a long time, but they're not so necessary anymore because the internet has enabled the world to communicate rapidly and inexpensively, and these new decentralized technologies like BitTorrent, Bitcoin, Ethereum, enable the formation of consensus among geographically dispersed groups of people to be cheap and easy.
So what are we headed towards?
I think it's fair to say that there is, at least in certain circles, a backlash against centralized authority and centralized power and centralized wealth. And as I indicated before, the centralization is not so necessary anymore in order to build effective, efficient systems. It's necessary if you want to maintain control of those systems, if you're in a position where you have vested interests and you want to maintain and consolidate and increase power. Hierarchical top-down control systems are excellent for that, but our societies don't need them as much anymore.
I'm a sci-fi fan. I know you're a sci-fi fan. And, you know, majority of the science fiction, when you watch it on television or when you watch it in movies, you know, it's a very dystopian view of the future where there's this centralized, malevolent entity that has enslaved the human population or is in the process of doing that. You know, it seems like that, you know, with a lot of sci-fi programs and films. And these tenets of decentralization and transparency are the exact opposite. So it really gives sort of like this positive Gene Roddenberry-esque view of the future.
Sure.
That's what it seems like to me.
Yeah, I think so. I think, again, if you share power, if you enable people to be sovereign and self-determining, and these networks, I think, will enable them to build their own lives, build their own businesses, less dependent on financial censorship in the sense that they can't get loans or can't get bank accounts even. So, yeah, the dramatic science fiction with the big, dark, centralized power, maybe that will be not a big presence on this planet at some point in the next few decades.
And it's too big of a presence now.
It's an appropriate sized presence now.
The centralization.
Yeah,
okay.
We needed that sort of structure, the way we were configured on planet Earth to advance society and technology. It all made sense, and it was the right and efficient way to do things.
Right.
But it's no longer as necessary. And so you can still make use of a lot of that, and we can certainly make use of a lot of the benefits it brought. especially in the form of technology. But there are other organizing principles that might be more effective soon.
So this entire centralization, concentration of power and wealth to very specific power bases, we're at a point in time now where we're evolving beyond that, or should be evolving beyond that?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Hope so.
So we've got a spectrum then, and on one extreme end of the spectrum is anarchy, total deregulation. Let's say the techno-anarchists, and on the other end of the spectrum.
But it's not anarchy. It's like a set of economic protocols implemented in code.
Okay, but compared to the other end of the spectrum, which is the central bankers,
yeah.
everything that this other side is, if they just saw this on paper 30, 40 years ago and read the tenets of it, it would, I think, be not only anarchy, but it'd be subversive and dangerous and an enemy to everything that they stand for.
I'm sure some people consider decentralization subversive. It goes against their personal or corporate agendas or governmental agendas.
I mean, because already there's fights brewing, there's battles being fought between the centralized establishment and everything that companies such as Ethereum and other companies in this Bitcoin realm
right.
are doing.
Yeah, I think that's extreme to characterize it as fights.
Okay.
I think regulators or bankers are just doing their jobs. They're protecting their turf. If you're a regulator, your mission is to protect the public, perhaps, but also you have your own career and you're thinking about your own personal agenda. And so far what we've seen has not been, at least in the United States or most of the Western world, has not been too negative. These technologies are complicated and very different, very foreign, and so the understandable initial reaction is, stop that. How do we stop that? And when people, I've never really met anybody who, once they got it, once they understood Bitcoin and what it enables and how it works, that they weren't amazed and impressed with the technology itself and some potential ramifications. Unless they have some sort of agenda, there may be a pundit, an economist pundit out in the world, perhaps, who writes strongly against Bitcoin, but I think he's kind of being paid to do that.
So you're seeing more or less eventually a positive, very smooth transition.
Talk to a lot of regulators, lawyers, bankers. There are a lot of people who are in favor of some of the changes that these kinds of technologies will bring.